There are dollars that don't just drain your wallet, they shatter the hearts you love the most. I remember that day so vividly, the soft yellow glow of a kitchen lamp spilling through the window, stretching across the counter. There it was, a thick envelope stamped with the bank's logo, sitting silently like a secret nobody dared to touch. The child in me saw it as salvation. The grown man in me saw it with a mix of hope, dread, and fear. "From now on, don't talk about money," my mom said, her lips trembling, her voice breaking as if every word carved into her own heart. "We've already used up the savings." That sentence never left me. Even decades later, it's etched into my memory, not just as a sign of financial struggle, but as the marker of a silence, a quiet tragedy between the two of us. I was born in a small town in the Midwest, the kind of place where neighbors still borrowed sugar, where weekends were more about the sound of wind through the trees than the noise of cars. My dad was an engineer at a local construction company, and my mom taught elementary school. We had a modest home, nothing fancy, nothing extra, but it was warm. Evenings were filled with the clatter of my mom cooking in the kitchen, the rustle of my dad flipping through the newspaper, and me sprawled out on the worn rug, building Lego towers or reading comic books that had been taped back together. I remember those brutal winters, the wind howling through the cracks in the windows, snow piling high on the roof. Dad would drape his heavy coat over my mom's shoulders, and Mom would carefully slip handmade wool mittens onto my hands before sending me off to school. We weren't wealthy, but I never felt poor. Love filled every gap money left behind. I still recall the last holiday with my dad. He stood on a rickety chair in the living room, fixing an old chandelier. He laughed and said, "This light will always stay with this family." I smiled. I didn't know that his light would go out forever, just weeks later. The first tragedy hit us on a cold March morning. My dad, gone in an instant. A sudden heart attack, too fast, too cruel. I can still see Mom in that thin coat, running after the ambulance, her hair flying wild in the wind. And me, standing frozen in the yard, my hands shaking, heart racing, trying to understand why my whole world had collapsed in a single morning. At the funeral, Mom sat beside his casket, not shedding a single tear. People said she was strong, but that night I heard muffled sobs bleeding through the thin walls. It was the first time I learned. Grief doesn't always scream. Sometimes it hides, quiet and endless. From that day on, Mom became everything. A single mother, taking on 2, sometimes 3 jobs, scraping together every dime to raise me. Inside that small house, no one talked about money, as if silence could make the weight easier to bear. I watched her stay up later and later. She took on remote grading work for a school miles away while tutoring kids from the neighborhood in math. Every night I heard the soft clicking of the old keyboard, the hum of a tired fan. The bluish light from her screen cast her frail shadow across the wall. As I got older, I realized our life was paid for in quiet dinners, dim lights, and the sound of sighs slipping out behind closed doors. Each semester, no matter what, she managed to pull out a few $100s, though her teacher's salary hadn't changed in years. When I asked, she would just smile and say, "Don't worry, I have my ways." And I believed her. Maybe because I wanted to, maybe because I was afraid of breaking the fragile peace between us. I made it to college, partly through scholarships, partly, as Mom claimed, with money she'd saved for years. I never questioned it. Every month she still sent me a couple $100s, even though she was living off her pension and tutoring jobs. I was grateful, but worry crept in. I studied hard, worked part-time, sent her money, but she always refused. Once, I wired her a few hundred. She sent it right back with a handwritten note. "That's your money. Don't let me touch it." I graduated, got my first job, got married, started building a life. My wife, practical, grounded, always told me, "We need to be financially independent from your family." And though I understood, I couldn't stop thinking about Mom. Sometimes, I secretly sent her money. I even opened a separate credit card just for that. But secrets grow heavy. My wife started to notice. She felt betrayed. I felt trapped, torn between the woman who raised me and the woman I promised to build a life with. One night, she said to me, "I'm not jealous of your mom, but I'm scared that one day we'll be living in debt too, and we'll be too afraid to talk about it." Her words hit me like a brick. Maybe I was repeating the very silence Mom had lived her whole life. Then, everything changed. Mom collapsed in the bathroom. The diagnosis, late-stage liver cancer. The doctor's words still ring in my ears. "We need to decide quickly." The treatment would cost tens of thousands of dollars. I panicked, ready to sell my car, mortgage our small apartment, anything to save her. One night, digging through her closet for insurance papers, I found an old envelope. Inside were bank statements, not hers. They were loans taken out in my name. I froze. Mom had been borrowing in my name since high school. She used it to cover my tuition, my hospital bills after an accident, and everything else to make sure I never felt less than my friends. And all these years, I never knew. When I confronted her, she was silent for a long time. Then she broke down. "I'm sorry. I just didn't want you to grow up with the weight of not having a father." Anger burned inside me. I felt betrayed. But as I looked at her, frail, broken, her eyes swollen from crying, I understood. This wasn't deception to hurt me. It was love, fierce, desperate, lonely love. In her final days, Mom grew weaker. I sat by her bed, holding her hand. No anger left, only gratitude. In broken whispers, she said, "Forgive me. I just wanted you to have the life I never could." She passed away on a gray, drizzly afternoon. The room was quiet except for the slowing beep of the monitor. I held her hand as it grew colder, realizing there are losses no amount of money could ever measure. After the funeral, I began repaying the debt that carried my name but was born from her sacrifice. I sold the car, cut down my life, learned to live simply. But my heart was lighter because I knew I owed her nothing anymore except love. I started writing. About her, about those long nights lit by the glow of a computer screen, about the silence that raised me. Writing to remember, writing to forgive, writing to keep her alive in me. I quit my job, chose freelancing, slowed down my life. My wife and I rebuilt our home on new ground. No more secrets, no more financial silence. Every decision, every expense shared openly. Years later, when my son was born, I held him in my arms and promised, "You will grow up not just with love, but with honesty about money," the honesty I never had. I couldn't save my mom from her solitude, but I could break the cycle for my own child. Final lesson: some debts don't appear on a bank statement. They live inside a mother's heart. The greatest lesson I learned didn't come from a budget spreadsheet. It came from this truth: the more you hide your debt, the heavier it becomes. My mom carried it alone, out of love. But silence has a price. Isolation. If you're carrying debt, don't carry it alone. And if you're being loved, don't just receive, give back. Money doesn't destroy family. Silence does. Talk about it, share it, learn to manage it together. Because if money isn't spoken about, it becomes the language of breaking apart.